Hey everybody, and welcome to the channel. Today I want to start a series of walking through Guitar Rig 6 and let me show you its capabilities for use as a general effects rack. So not for guitars. I mean I can play a little guitar, but I don't have any guitars anymore. I sold them all. I don't use Guitar Rig 6 for guitars. I use them for anything, just as my general effects rack. As some of you may know, Guitar Rig is full of filters, equalizers, reverbs, delays, modulation. You can modulate any kind of effects parameters within Guitar Rig with separate modulators, kind of like you can do in a synth. So this series is about Guitar Rig 6, and within each episode, I want to walk you through one module or maximum of 2 modules that are my favorites. So I'm going to walk you through my favorite picks of some modules in Guitar Rig 6, and today I want to start with 2 filters. It's the Doppler filter and the filter or / distortion unit known as driver. So what we have here is we have Doppler and driver loaded, and I want to start with driver at the top. Here's the drum loop. All right, so driver started as a standalone plugin, which is a distortion unit / filter. On the right side here, we have the distortion, and on the left side, we have the filter. And both the filter frequency as well as the distortion amount can be modulated by either an envelope generator or an amplitude modulator. So what this does is it listens to the incoming audio signal that goes through the effects unit, and that manipulates the envelope filter and the amplitude modulation. So the level of the incoming audio is what controls these modulation controls. So I'll just let you hear it. For instance, let's just set this to 0 and listen to what it sounds like on its own. This is without. This is with. See, so even though these controls are barely doing anything, the filter's all the way up the highest it can go, so it's not filtering off anything, and the distortion is set to 0. It's already adding a bunch of volume, a bunch of gain, and a certain harshness to the sound. The top end is becoming a bit brittle, so this is a very aggressive unit. One thing off to the left here is that you can set the input level and the resonance for the filter, which can get really squelchy, which can be very cool for your 303 type distortion sounds. So let's play with it a little. Let's go from left to right, see what the input does and see what the filter does. Okay, I can see about a red light here is lighting up. So that means the input was probably already clipping a bit. Okay, you hear that? Just by controlling the input, you already get a ton of distortion. This sounds like more like the original drum loop, albeit at a lower audio level. And watch when I turn up the gain, it already adds a ton of distortion. Nasty. All right, let's set that to about -2. Yeah, I feel that is kind of the equal loudness. It does change the sound character, but the loudness is about the same now. Now off to the right, we have the filter, and Here we can change the filter to a low pass filter or a notch filter. Let's first see what the low pass filter sounds like. All right, pretty basic stuff, right? But the unit does have a certain, I hate the kind of word, but fatness to it. Fat with PH, but a certain fatness to it. That's because it also goes through the distortion unit, which is very nice. Okay, let's play with the resonance. All right. I don't want to blow your ears because once you crank up this resonance really high, it can go wild. And I don't want to hurt your ears, but you get the idea here. Now the modulation controls. Let's see if I turn up the envelope modulator. Set the cutoff somewhere low so the envelope can actually do its work. So now the input signal, according to what I have set here, here, these are the controls of the envelope modulator. So you can either have a smooth out attack or a more faster attack. That's what this one is for. And then the release setting. So what that does is the audio level that comes into the filter determines how much the filter cutoff is moved to the right. So it increases the filter cutoff along with the incoming audio signal. So like this. Yeah, cool. That adds some movement to the filter. It's very cool. So let's see what happens when they call this parameter smooth, but it actually is a attack parameter and release parameter here. Let's play with that a little. Takes longer now for it to take effect. Let's set it a bit faster. Longer release. See, I can add interesting movement to a drum loop like that, or this could be a percussion part or a bass part, synth bass, or whatever. So it just modulates the cutoff a bit, adds some interest into the sound. So that's the low pass filter. Let's hear what the notch filter sounds like. So for those of you that don't know, low pass filter is quite obvious. It cuts off all the high end according to the cutoff frequency. So anything above that gets cut off. But a notch filter actually notches out quite a bit of the frequency with a very steep notch right where the frequency is set. So right now is set at 306 hertz. That means at that frequency, a big EQ cut is being made. It's notched out, like not down to negative 15 or anything. It just goes to infinity. So just basically cut out that whole part of the frequency spectrum. Let's move it around a little. See what that sounds like? And then with the resonance, you can increase the width of that notch. So I don't see any graph here or anything, but what I'm guessing is you can already hear it by the sound. Like at the edges where that notch goes in, once you increase the resonance, the edges of that notch get this slight resonant bump on the sides here. That's what you hear when you turn up this resonance when you've got the filter set to notch. Listen. Very wide cut. Now listen as I turn up the resonance. Around the edges, it bumps up. Makes a quite interesting sound, right? Well, let's set it to a more kind of a neutral setting. Not too tame though. I want you guys to hear it, to hear what it does. What I always say with effects or you're setting a reverb or a compressor or an EQ of whatever, just go wild. You know, no one's going to die. Nothing's going to get hurt. You know, it's just a plug-in in a DAW. Just overdo the setting first. If you're having trouble hearing it, overdo the setting first, like way overdo it so you can really hear what it's doing, and then dial it back a bit, you know, to get it to fit. Okay, now let's modulate this filter. The input level is modulating the filter cutoff according to the attack and release settings here. Yeah, cool. Now amplitude modulation. What that does is over to the right here, we have AM. So that's amplitude modulation. That actually has an oscillator running, in this case, a low frequency oscillator that will then modulate the cutoff. So if you have an oscillator oscillating at 60 hertz, the filter cutoff will be moved at like 60 times a second, right? So that gives this kind of sound character. Yeah. So now it's very slow. It's only going at 0.30 hertz. So 0.3 times per second. So, all right. We can set it higher. High frequency oscillator. Let's set that at 60 hertz if we can. 60.5. Fine. What happened, right? What's this fart noise? Well, now is actually going into the, it's not a low frequency oscillator anymore. It's going into the audio range, which gives this almost like kind of AM, FM kind of sound. I said it really fast. Recognize that sound? Set the envelope setting here to make it go positive amount or negative. All right. Me personally, I don't like that sound too much. If I'm going for that kind of sound, I'll just use a bit crusher or anything like that. But I very much like that envelope modulation that moves the filter cutoff. So now the distortion module. Let's set that filter cutoff all the way to the right so it's not basically not doing anything. So we can listen to the distortion. Let's just crank it up. Whoa. Probably need to turn on the resonance. Oh, So what's going on there? That means that the filter, whatever's happening to the filter, controls what's going on in the distortion. They're linked together like that. Because right now, nothing's happening with the filter. And if I turn up the distortion, nothing, right? But if I set the filter cutoff, the low pass filter to, let's say, 1K, around 1K, all right, it's doing something, right? Let's give it some resonance. Yeah. And now let's turn the distortion. Bam, 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 bam. No distortion. Distortion. Right? Now, the distortion also has a coloration knob. So that determines the color of the distortion. You can go from darker to a bit brighter. Hear how that distorts the low end more when you turn it all the way to the left? And all the way to the right, it starts to leave the low frequencies alone a bit more and starts to distort more of the mid-range, more accents the high frequencies in the mid-range. I like it somewhere down here. And of course, it all depends on what kind of effect you're going for. Okay, now let's make the input volume modulate the amount of distortion that's being applied, right? Let's set this down to like 0, no distortion being applied, and let this control the amount of distortion that actually is being applied. All right, so here the attack and release settings will control how quickly that amount of distortion is going to die off. Very short release setting, and now it's just affecting the transients and leaving the rest alone, distortion wise. Listen. No distortion modulation. And now width. Now let's modulate the filter cutoff as well. Without any of it? Listen to the hi-hat as I engage this. It becomes this shook, shook, shook. Gives it a bit more groove. Cool, huh? Yeah, quite fun little unit. How much time do we have? All right, I'm going to go ahead and go on to the Doppler filter as well. So that's it for driver Doppler filter. I mean, I have Soundtoys Filter Freak. That's a great filter. And the filters inside of Logic are also great. But I love this Doppler filter. So basically how this works is you can have these filters set to either be a bandpass filter, a low pass filter, or a high pass filter. So there's 2 filters, and each of them can be either of those 3, either a low pass, band pass, or a high pass. And that's what these switches are for here, or these controls. And actually, it morphs between those filters, right? You can see in the graph here what it does. It morphs between those filter types. Then, of course, you have the resonance control. and you have drive control per filter. And the spread, what the spread does is whatever cutoff you have set, if you turn this all the way to the right, it will actually increase the cutoff on the right audio channel and decrease the cutoff to the left. So I will let you hear that later on. That actually creates a difference between filtering that is applied between left and right channel. So that can sometimes be a really cool effect if you set these for the left and right differently. So you have like a high pass filter on the left and a low pass filter on the right, and then you spread them around. So here you can actually see the routing. Right now, filter A, which is the top filter, is going through in series to filter B. If you click on this, then it's going to they're running parallel. That means filter A is being applied, and that's going to the output, and then filter B is being applied to the signal, and that's going on to the output. Whereas when you have it set like this in series, filter A gets applied, then gets run through filter B, and then that gets run through to the output, so in series. That's actually what I like best for my kind of applications, and I'll let you hear what this sounds like. This control here, you can see by the colors, controls what filter you're hearing. So if you have this set this to series like this, where A runs into filter B, you can just set this to only hear filter B, and then whatever you do to filter A, you will hear it too, because filter A runs into filter B. It's now hooked up in series. So let's set this so it's not doing anything. So I have it set to a low pass filter, cut off all the way up. You can see it's barely filtering anything. There's a slight roll off in the high end. So even if you zero all this out and you engage it, you see it still alters the sound so very slightly, especially if you have the drive set here and some resonance set here, but it's almost negligible, but it does affect the sound a little. So let's hear. We have this set to a low pass filter. Nice filter. Let's play with the resonance a bit. These resonances can also get a little wild if you crank them all the way up, so mind your ears sometimes. Okay, now let's set filter B. Let's set that to a high pass. So now I effectively have a bandpass filter. I created a bandpass filter because filter A is cutting off the high end, so it's a low pass filter, and that runs into filter B, and filter B is here rolling off the low end, so it's a high pass filter. So what you're hearing is what's left in between there. But what's cool now is that you can set different resonance amounts for what happens at the edges. And you can set filter drive per filter. Hear that? So now we're just hearing filter A. I've set filter B to 0. It's not doing anything. This is all the drive from filter A. So if you really want to drive the sound a lot, but I just usually keep it at 20, so it's far more subtle. It's not driving a whole lot. I'm not aiming to distort the sound or anything, but if it adds a bit of color, that's fine. I like it that way. So let's see. Yeah, we have these controls here at the left. They're both indicated as FM. And what that does, it same as with driver, actually the incoming audio signal then instead of amplitude modulating, it's frequency modulating the filter cutoffs here. It can add for an interesting effect, but for me, that's not very it's not very useful. I just like this filter for the filter. Whether I want to filter a synth or a whole drum bus, you know, or whatever groups. Now you have an icon here, and within driver, you might have also seen the SC indication here. That means they can also accept through the sidechain filter of guitar rig an incoming audio signal from another track. So that determines that then lets the audio level of another track control the frequency cutoff. Then another track in your DAW, the output level of that track controls frequency modulates the filter cutoff here. Okay, but here's the thing with guitar rig. Here comes the cool stuff. This is all cool and everything, but let's say, okay, but what about what I had here? The incoming audio signal, I want an envelope modulator to this filter cutoff. Whereas all I have here inside the filter is that frequency modulation, which I don't like sound-wise. So you can go into Guitar Rig here and you have modifier tools and let's say input level. So you get a separate effects unit that listens to the incoming audio signal that comes into Guitar Rig. And you can drag that, have that control anything in the Guitar Rig 6 interface. I can have it control the resonance and driver, or in this case, the frequency cutoff of the low pass filter of filter A. Let's set it down to a level that you can hear what it's actually doing. If I open up the screw here, and that goes for anything in Guitar Rig, you open up the advanced panel. So with this input level modulator, you can actually control how much or what the modulation amount is. So let's set it to a tiny amount and then increase it to hear what it's doing. You see? Now for something like drums, that's not very useful to me. So I want a shorter attack time. Let's listen to that. Okay, okay. The amount of decay, you can set it very short. So the amount of modulation only happens over a short period of time. Now, here's the thing. Uh, This is fine and everything, but what I find lacking in this modulator, and I wish Native Instruments would do this, in any kind of filter that has this modulation built in, like for instance, SoundToys Filter Freak, or what you had up here with Driver, where it has this envelope modulation to the filter cutoff frequency natively, is that the attack times of the envelope are much sharper. And even there, when you had the attack time here with Driver at the shortest amount, the attack times are too slow for my taste, especially when you're applying it to drums. You know, what I would wish for is if you have the attack time to the lowest setting here, is that it would pick up on those drum transients. And then you can really start shaping those drums with these kind of filters and play with the decay time a little, or with the offset level that determines where the frequency cutoff goes to. You know, how far out, right? So this is potentially gives you a lot of shaping opportunities, but I just wish Native Instruments would have let us have much faster attack times here. Now you can see here in interface it says 1 millisecond, but that attack time, that is nowhere near 1 millisecond. There's some kind of internal delay there because I'm not hearing the transients of the drums. Okay, so Native Instruments, if you're listening, which of course they are not, fix it. Other than that, I mean, I personally think Guitar Rig 6 is great. These filters are great. And further along the series, I'm gonna let you guys hear how I use my other favorite modules, because we got great choruses, delays, reverbs, phasers, even compressors, EQs, whole channel strips for mixing. So today I just wanted to let you guys see and hear Driver and Doppler filter, which are my favorite filters in Guitar Rig 6. And I use them a lot. Even sometimes where I don't like the filtering on a synth plugin, you know, that's in there natively, I just put on the Doppler filter. It's great sounding. Okay, I hope you guys enjoyed this, and if you have any questions, please leave them down in the comments, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Cheers.